Hi, everyone. This is a Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Younger, your host. Employee experience is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing of some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself in the stories my guests tell about times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Today, I am super thrilled to be speaking with Patty Salazar, Banking Commissioner for the state of Colorado. Enjoy. Well, hello, and thank you for joining the Leadership with Heart podcast. This is Heather Younger, your host. I am super excited to be speaking with Patty Salazar today. She is the Banking Commissioner for Colorado and just really an amazing leader. I had the opportunity to speak at an event where she was also a speaker, and we were sitting at the table, and she was telling me about all the different things that she was doing as a leader and some of the challenges that she maybe have had. But at the same time, I could see she was someone who's super open to change and to just becoming better for her team and, for the state and for herself and just for everybody around her. So I was very impressed. And other people at the table were like, oh, you should really talk to her on your show. And I'm like, oh, now I'm really intrigued. I'm totally going to be getting to understand more about Patty here. So she's here now. Thank you so much for joining, Patty.
Thank you so much, Heather. That was an incredibly kind introduction. Thank you.
So where are you right now in your leadership journey?
So as you had noted, I am the State Bank Commissioner here in the state of Colorado, which means that I oversee our Division of Banking for our state's regulatory agency. I have around 60 folks that are within my division, and as most folks know, when you lead a government agency, as we're mentioning, I embrace change. The concept of change and change management isn't necessarily very widely embraced. However, though, I am always the kind of person who feels as though that we should be looking at how to improve ourselves, not only on a personal level, but organizationally as well as professionally. And so I'm hoping to do some really good positive things here at our agency. I've been in this role now for 5 months. I have worn 3 different executive leadership hats here at the overall agency. And as I said, I'm hoping to do some really great stuff for the people of Colorado.
Oh, that's awesome. So when we think of the leadership space and the 60 folks that are kind of under your charge, and you all have a huge responsibility, what would you consider to be your leadership style? Let's say this, how would your team that's now been under your charge for 5 months, how maybe they would describe your leadership style?
Well, that question is usually a little hard to answer because I truly do think it's situational. There are times where I have to make a very quick decision and own it and run with it and, of course, communicate it with them later. However, though, I think my leadership style of preference would to be far more collaborative, just including folks in the process as I'm making a decision, primarily because they're really the brain trust of our agency. I only know so much, and the one thing that I know for a fact is that I don't know everything. And so I really do depend on the great people here that have decades of knowledge that I will just never be able to have to really help me make those really hard pressing decisions. But even at that, though, once I make the decision, I know that I'm the person who's accountable for it. If it goes successfully, wonderful. And if it goes astray, that's also my responsibility to take ownership of that. And so there's also situations, though, where I trust them enough to not even be involved in the decision-making process. So again, my leadership style, I think, really is situational. But what I expect, though, both from my staff and from myself, is to communicate and to make sure that we're all sharing the same vision and communicating with each other and building that mutual trust and respect to get us where we want to go.
Awesome. That's great. Well, so here's one thing I ask a lot of people, and the biggest thing is where most of us have a drive or a seed that's planted in us, maybe early on, or just something that made us have a desire to lead others, because you're leading others in like much bigger mission as it relates to the state of Colorado. But what is it? What's that seed in you? Was it like a parent? Was it just a previous incident? Was it a former mentor that really made I want to be someone who is, leading others as well?
So I'm going to warn you. I get a little emotional when I talk about this, but it really is my parents. My dad is a Vietnam vet. My mother came. See, I get emotional. My mother came to the United States when she was 29 years old, and I will admit I've had an incredibly privileged life as an adult. I've met some of our greatest leaders, not only on a state level but on a national level. I'm around very successful business people. I'm around just true people of influence. However, though, by far my favorite people are my parents, because they, to me, epitomize what good character and integrity are. And so given the fact that I've been so fortunate in my life, the one thing that drives me every single day is to make my parents proud, and just to acknowledge that all of their sacrifice and trust in me and faith in me is paying off. And I'm doing that by contributing back to the state that I live in and into my community and staff. Yeah, I got emotional.
That's rich. You got me tearing up now. Now that's not a far stretch for me. That's because I'm a teary girl. So people that know me know I'm just that way. It's extra sensitive, but I love that. I mean, I think to a large extent, a lot of us have some of that drive of wanting to make our parents proud, but I can hear it even more inside of your voice. And so then knowing that idea of character and integrity, which I got from you immediately sitting at the table with you, like, wow, I can see why you're where you're at. I can see why you were selected to be exactly where you're at. And I'm sure those around you. So here's a little side question on that. When we are leaders who are confident and strong and passionate, driven and embracing and collaborative, not everybody likes that. So how have you handled that kind of over your career, being that type of woman, which, an amazing woman, but how do you handle sometimes when or you maybe even talk about a time, or, give an example maybe where maybe you had to overcome that? Because I know that I myself have had some of those issues where I'm like, I don't mean to be intimidating, or I don't mean to, charge forward and run over people. I really don't. I like to collaborate, but sometimes I have to overcome that. And so what have you done to kind of overcome some of that?
I think it's just valuing authenticity. With me, what you see is what you get. And I say that both as the director of my division, but also someone who has to work with our business community and our community organizations. I'm not here to do anything disingenuous. I want folks to know that I am transparent and that I'm trying to do the right thing. And sometimes folks don't like that. I know I'm on a podcast, so people can't necessarily see what I look like, but I am a woman of color who is leading a division. And granted, there is great diversity in our state, but as I had mentioned when I had met you, there have not been women. Rather, I'm only the second woman in my position, and I'm the first person of color in my position. And sometimes that makes people feel a little uncomfortable, and that's okay. Because at the end of the day, all I can do is just really hold my head up high and know that I'm doing the right thing, at least what I believe is to be the right thing, and that I'm not trying to, again, make anyone feel uncomfortable. I'm just trying to do what I do with integrity and openness. And it's who I am.
Love it. With integrity and openness. That is so.
I hope that answers your question.
Well, you did answer the question, and some of these words, like they hit me, they hit my ears and sometimes my heart in such a way. So listening to this idea of openness, as a leader, openness for you, it's extended to the internal. You're leading folks in the community, just in that really big prominent role. We lead by our integrity, we lead by our actions, we lead by our inactions, and what we say and what we fail, what we fail to say. And there's a lot of scrutiny and a lot of eyes on us. So I appreciate this idea of being authentic and having integrity and being open to messages and to the people around you. And it's probably because you expect and hope that others will do the same for you too.
Absolutely. And, I think there was a time much earlier in my career where I would go up and do a public speaking engagement. And I would then go back and reanalyze every single thing that I said and question myself as to whether or not I was truly expressing what I wanted to express, but more so how they would be receptive to that. And granted, I still do that occasionally, depending on what the situation is, but part of my journey has just been learning to be okay with just saying what I say, so long as I'm authentic when I'm saying it.
Wow. That's a big one in politics. I mean, in your role, I know you don't take a side. There's none of that going on, but it's still, government, it's state government. So to that extent, most people would think they know that you're kind of choosing your words, and authenticity isn't something you would normally see in government. I worked for Adams County and obviously in local government. And it's that same type of thing where people don't expect that level of openness and connection and all those things. And when you give it to them, they're kind of shocked. They're like, what? I don't even know how to deal with this.
Well, and I will say that the folks that work here at our division are by far some of the most committed public servants that I've ever come across. And I feel as though they deserve a leader like that. They deserve someone who's open and someone who is going to be upfront and, supporting their core mission of protecting consumers in our state and being just as equally committed, if not more committed, to that cause.
I love it. Okay, so I'm sure the listeners will be able to tell how awesome you are. What we always do on the show is we kind of move over a little bit and talk about a time when maybe you weren't the most enlightened leader, or you weren't at the place where you're your best self. Can you think of a time, really, a specific example of when maybe you weren't the best leader you are now? And then also, what did you do to move past that, to become that leader you are today?
So I think I can come up with a couple of examples, only because, again, I think as leaders, we tend to probably be our harshest critic. However, there was a point in my life where I'm sure many folks can relate, where there was a struggle with work-life balance. My husband and I had a loss in our family where we had to be the primary folks that were taking charge of the services. My stepdaughter had broken her arm. I was starting to transition in my job. We had a legislative session here. We were dealing with a handful of really hard, challenging policy issues. And so it was overwhelming. I'm not gonna lie, it was terribly overwhelming. I was exhausted, and it was a little hard to get motivated. And maybe not motivated, probably isn't a word. It was really hard to be truly engaged and present in all of it, because again, I was dealing with life stuff, I was dealing with work stuff, and I was trying to really figure out where I should be focusing my energy. And it was hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will. And it was probably one of the hardest times for me to figure out where my priorities should be. And with respect to getting out of it, it really was just a matter of taking the time to let time pass, especially with the family stuff, because of course, services ended, and of course you still deal with the loss, but you're able to heal from that. As did my stepdaughter's broken arm. She was able to heal from that. But on the work front, I think just being open with my core team, the folks that I work directly with, and just kind of explaining to them the challenges I was going through, not to put the burden on them necessarily, but just to talk it through so they can better understand what I was still trying to achieve for the sake of all of us, even though my focus was kind of in all these different buckets. And because we have such a great relationship, I was incredibly pleasantly surprised, rather, that, people are willing to step up and help you out when you're going through those challenges. It doesn't matter if, you're the quote unquote leader or the manager. People want to help each other out. And so it really was just trusting my team and talking them through it, and just learning how to ask for that support. Because if you don't ask for it, no one's going to give it to you. And so it really was just kind of checking in with myself, figuring out where I wanted to go, and just being okay with being in a hard time, and just figuring out a way to get through it by trusting your team.
So how did going through that time actually display itself in that example? So, when you went through that time and it was difficult, what were you doing or failing to do that caused you to then say, I need to talk to the team about what's happening? Was there attitude adjustment, like attitude slipped, or something? I'm curious to know what actually showed up for you in that moment.
It just wasn't being able to physically be in multiple places at once. It was really that simple, where I had an important meeting that I had to attend, but at the same time, though, there was a service that I physically had to be at as well. It was, it really was just a physical presence, where there's only so many hours in a day and you are only one person. It's just acknowledging again that you can't be everything to everyone all the time. You can only be good to yourself, and kind of figuring out where you should be for the sake of your own sanity in some respects, because if you're not good with where you are, you're not going to be good for everyone else. And so it really was just kind of, again, the challenges of having to do so much all within a short amount of time, and being okay with not being able to do it all.
Yes. That's a hard one. So it's hard for everyone.
Really hard.
It's really hard for very successful and probably even more high profile women in leadership positions, because we are just, spread out all over the place with the multiple roles. And again, I'm not trying to be stereotypical. There obviously are men that feel this way and do that as well. But more often than not, women we already consider ourselves, really good multitaskers. But that just causes us to take on way too much. And then our heads start to spin, and then we can't be present for anybody. So it kind of goes to that idea of self-care. As leaders, we cannot give what we do not have. And we have to take the time to, to take care of ourselves, not only to skill ourselves up for just being more prepared for the role, but when we feel ourselves going way downhill, I appreciate and just love the fact that you were willing to be vulnerable enough, again, even in your position, to go to your team and say, hey, here's the reason why. And like you said, it wasn't to overdo it or to overshare things, but they did need to understand. And what I find happens, actually, I was at a position, I don't know, 8-9 years ago, and I took a position over for someone, and one of my new team members said, what was the strangest thing about our previous manager? He never let us know he went through a divorce while he was overseeing us. Mm-hmm. And so he went through all of this stuff, and they had kids, and it was shocking to me. I don't even know how that's possible. Now, I'm not an advocate of just going around and talking about, dirty laundry all over the place to my team, but I do think what you did was something you have to do. You and I had this conversation at the table, right? There's a balance of how much you share and how much you don't share. And it's not easy sometimes.
And it's not, and I think the hardest part for me was I was delegating these very important tasks, and I would get the question, well, why? Why can't you do, it was the staff feeling as though they were terribly pressured to do something, and just kind of explaining that why. And once you do that, again, it goes back to communication and trust. It's like, okay, absolutely. And I made sure that, because at the end of the day, everything that happens here is ultimately my responsibility. And so I did everything else that I possibly could to make sure that they were as prepared as possible. I did all the background work to make sure there was going to be nothing too pressing or that they would be entirely unprepared for. And again, just doing everything that I needed to do to lead up to that point. And it's hard because you kind of have to let go a little. And for me, that's a challenge sometimes, admittedly, because as you're saying, you're just balancing all of this. And you don't want anything to go wrong, not only for your sake, but for the sake of your team, because you definitely don't want that to be detrimental to your overall dynamic and the trust that exists.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All of this is so complicated, isn't it? I mean, I write books. I write a book on leadership. I'll be writing another book on leadership. We write books. We hear talks. But in the end, when we are in the trenches, when we are living this is some hard stuff. And there's no way around it.
Really. There's no way around it. Yeah.
There's no way around it. I mean, I create this podcast because I want people to hear, from leaders like you, and they're from all over the place, to hear the challenges, how you come out of it. And maybe we all can just learn together and get a little better at this role of leadership that we play. But I think that, in the end, there's really no easy way around it. And we have to put in the hard work. We have to learn on our own. And just try to do the right thing and be the best we can. And we know we're not perfect. This is not about perfection. It's about continuous improvement. How are we moving ourselves forward every day, a little bit every day in all these areas, and just trying to remain balanced in that thinking, for ourselves and for the team.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you for this opportunity. I was incredibly pleased when you had invited me to join you on this. Just hearing your presentation and hearing your own story was just motivating for me, and it really did give me inspiration to come back and reassess what I'm doing within my own staff to help make sure that I'm leading them in the best way that I possibly can. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. It's all like I just said before we started. It's about evangelizing the message. It really is for me so much about getting out there. If I can change one leader's actions and or communications with their team in just even the smallest ways, I'm going to be just ecstatic. I'll feel very successful and happy in life. So this is good to hear this. Okay, so what happens then when you get busy, and that's all the time. So when everybody's busy and everybody's running around and scattered everywhere, what happens? How do you reconnect with your team in a deeper, more meaningful way, so that you can kind of bring everybody back to center and know that this is about team?
It really is just making the time to have that one-on-one connection with everyone, and it doesn't necessarily have to be formal. I'm right now currently in the practice of trying to, whenever possible, just grab someone and take them out to lunch, or grab a cup of coffee, or just walk down the street real quick to get some fresh air. And of course there's a more formal exercises as well, where I have team meetings, and what I'm experimenting with now is doing almost like an informal reverse performance evaluation of asking folks who I manage how I'm doing, how I can improve. And I outline, so at my organization, we have formal performance evaluations that our supervisors review with us. And again, I'm in the practice right now of kind of turning the tables and asking my staff who report directly to me how I'm doing according to them, which I think has been it's been different than some of my predecessors with respect to how they receive feedback from staff. But I think it really has created an opportunity for staff to connect on a very different level, and I'm hoping it develops trust. And even if most of my staff are out in the field, predominantly, I would say 80% of the time, making sure that the banks here in our state are safe and sound. So I don't get to engage with them one-on-one physically as much as I would like to. However, it really is having those meaningful conversations whenever I do see them. And I believe you had previously said this as well. It's meeting them where they are. And so to the extent that I can go to where they are and have those conversations and let them know that, I value the work that they do, even if I don't see them all the time, I do truly value it. I think that creates a different type of connection that I wouldn't otherwise have if I just expected them to come to me.
I love that. So one of the things that hit me, I actually talk about this idea too, what you call the informal reverse performance review. I tried to get thinking about that at my last position. How can we really start to get it turned on its head so that it's not just about going a one way, but it's going the other way. And then for leaders to be able to humble themselves to get that kind of feedback, humble and obviously improve themselves. And then for the team members to feel empowered. And like you said, and also, safe enough to have that, to provide that feedback. We see that occasionally in 360 reviews. It might happen every 3 to 4 to 5 years. But this idea, I love it, of saying, how am I doing? And where am I really messing up right now? Because I know it's not going, as smoothly as we want, but tell me what you're thinking. And going into just even an informal conversation like that is super helpful, or doing it more formally, where it really is a reverse performance review, where it's something that's written and maybe you can make it even confidential. I just think it's an important cadence to have. And if we've built trust with our team members where they know we are there for them, we have gone to bat for them, we have shown our colors in a big way. When it's time for us to give feedback and us to receive feedback, it's not as hurtful if it would be if we didn't know the person.
Right.
Often we don't know our leaders. And so I think that makes a huge difference in this type of thing that you're doing. It's an innovative thing that you're doing.
And I mean, hopefully it'll be productive. I think so far it is, because again, it's just so different than what we've been doing thus far. But yeah, I mean, more to come on that. Actually, I was brainstorming before I called you, and one thing that I was thinking to myself was like, well, I know folks may not feel very comfortable coming to me directly, or even going to their supervisor and have them come to me with feedback. But I was toying with an idea of a virtual suggestion box that I may do later today, of just throwing out a question to staff and creating some sort of mechanism for them to provide to me anonymous feedback. And it can just be, a question specific to management, or it could be a question regarding some sort of operational procedure that we have in place, or whatever it may be. I was just kind of brainstorming, trying to think outside the box of what we can do that would kind of break down those walls and make people to your point, feel more comfortable with providing that feedback and doing something about it at the same time. So.
Absolutely. What I love about that, and this is kind of the crux of this feedback issue, which a lot of organizations get it wrong. And it is, if you're going to listen, you have to do two things. If you're listening for their voices, so through this feedback box that you're talking about, which is brilliant, I think it's great, make sure that you have a cadence in place that says maybe once a month, we're going to actually review some of the questions and if it's something that actually alludes that it might be one person over another, we'll take that stuff out. We want to keep it so it's just general enough that everybody can understand the message, and then say, and here's kind of, we thought about it, and here are some ideas, and we're going to put together a subgroup of people to really dive deeper into this issue because we think it's important enough. So you report that stuff out on a monthly or whatever cadence you want, quarterly. And you report it out and maybe what you're doing about it, what you plan to do about it, and if you're going to need more feedback from the troops. And then you go about doing the things you say you're going to do, and then you continue to report back to your team members what it is and what the success is and where you're at and the progress. That is I call it a cycle of listening, but it's crucial when we talk about voice, the power of voice. It's not just that you heard my voice. I don't know if I recalled this for you in my talk to the bankers, but when I talked about the baby and the baby, you come to the baby and you run to the baby and they're so excited to see you in the crib when they make all these noises and it's like, oh, and that's the reaction. Like I hear you and now I'm like coming, but you get to the point where like, I hear you and I'm no longer coming. And then you become apathetic. And then it's like, my voice is not important anymore. And when people start to feel like their voices are not heard, they check out and they're gone. Right.
Yeah.
So this is what you were talking. I think you're going down the brilliant track. I mean, it's amazing. It's good stuff.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, I'm excited. Like, all the stuff you're doing, I'm like, yes, tell me some more. Okay, so then basically there's folks that are listening in. There could be some leaders that are listening in that may be struggling in one area, one portion of their leadership. It could be anything. And usually I like to have the people on the show leave, one or two pearls of wisdom, one or two things that maybe you'd like to leave with the listeners who, again, may just be needing that extra boost in their leadership. What might it be? What might be your pearl of wisdom?
So I was just having this conversation with a good friend of mine who is a leader in her respective organization. I think we all face points in our career and in our lives where, we're just struggling a little and it's hard, whether it's work, family, whatever it may be. And not to necessarily say that only women go through this, but she's a woman. When you're a brilliant, strong, dynamic leader, and in her case, a brilliant, strong, dynamic woman, it's really hard to know when to ask for help. So the one thing that I encourage everyone to do is just to not be afraid to ask for support. I call it from your village. And what I mean by that is just your core network of folks, whether it is internal to your organization, whether it's in your family, your friends, mentors, whoever your village is. Just don't be afraid to ask for support from your village. I think when you are incredibly intelligent and strong and powerful, it almost feels as though you can't do that. But I am of the mindset is that if you are intelligent and strong and powerful, you know when is when. And you know when you need to check in with yourself and when to check in for those who care for you. And so, I think that's definitely one thing that I have to tell myself as well. But I mean, it's hard to remember that because sometimes you just feel like you want to have everything under control and you just don't. But again, it's just having had that conversation with a dear friend of mine who I think the world of and who I think is probably one of the most fiercest female leaders that I know. And having this very conversation with her, I just wanted to share that with your listeners.
I love this. Just this idea of, us having to put up this facade, of us having to be, this perfect specimen, of us being hard and like a shell that can't be broken is, we get that into our minds as leaders. And again, as all leaders, I think, but particularly women, it is that case. And we talked a little bit about that actually at the conference, but there are these different pressures that go in and out of all this, particularly because there is a soft side in most cases when we leave and we have children. And so we have that struggle. And I think it's an important message for everybody who's listening to hear that we don't always have to be that hard outer core. We don't have to always be so perfect where we actually just put all of us at risk if we do that. In this case, we make us all safer. We make us, just feel more balanced and more safe and secure when we do admit that we might need a little help. That's a great nugget to leave with listeners. Oh, thank you so much, Patty. That was great.
No, the only thing I would add to that is I think it looks different for everyone. I mean, some people that may just be sitting by yourself and reading a book and, taking the time to have just quiet time all to yourself. And for others, that may be talking to your boss, or that may be from a more technical standpoint, from an operational standpoint, to get the resources you need. And that may also just be being around friends. And so I think there's no one way that you can find that solution. So.
Thank you. That was awesome. So this is great. And anybody who wants to get a hold of Patty can go to the website on customerfanatics.com. And listen, if you really enjoyed this show, please do me a favor and rate it with 5 glowing stars on iTunes, if that's what you're listening, or wherever you do listen. And also write a review. The more that you do that, it actually comes to the top of the pile. And so when folks are looking for a leadership podcast, they will actually be able to get to this awesome content with these great guests more quickly. So it's been amazing. Thank you so much, Patty. It's been great.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.